The following content is a narrated account intended for storytelling and discussion.
Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I thought I was buying peace, a quiet lake cabin far from the noise. Instead, I got war, trespassers, forged maps, midnight sabotage, and one relentless HOA president hell-bent on stealing my land. They picked the wrong gate to break. My name's Russell James, and this is how I fought back. I never imagined that a fresh start in the mountains would turn into a territorial war, but I should have known peace never lasts long where there's an HOA sniffing around. My name is Russell James, 42 former Coast Guard officer and proud new owner of an old lake cabin nestled against a forested ridge in Montana. After 2 decades of service, I cashed out, bought myself a patch of serenity, and started a small residential repair business in town to keep my hands busy and mind sane. The cabin wasn't huge, but it had everything I wanted: clean air, water access, and a 1-lane gravel road that twisted through pine trees before ending at my steel gate. My gate, bolted, coated, and not meant for community joyrides. I'd only been living there about 3 months when I first noticed something odd. It was a Monday morning, early spring, still cold enough that the frost stuck to the gravel until noon. I grabbed my thermos and walked down the trail to check the gate, as I usually did after weekends. What I found made me stop mid-sip. Tire tracks. Fresh ones from something heavy. More than one vehicle. They'd cut across the edge of my grass, knocked over a landscaping marker I'd hammered in last week, and, this pissed me off, left behind 2 crushed beer cans and a half-eaten bag of chips wedged under a tree. At first, I thought maybe some teens had managed to sneak around, but then I saw it. The lock chain had been cleanly snipped and re-looped around the post, like nothing had happened. Back at the cabin, I pulled the SD card from the trail cam mounted on a pine tree near the bend in the road. The footage showed a black SUV, looked like a Range Rover, pulling up late Sunday afternoon. 4 people got out. They cut the lock, opened the gate, and drove straight down my road to the lake. The camera facing the dock showed them unloading a folding table, coolers, even one of those Bluetooth speakers shaped like a tiki torch. They stayed for nearly 4 hours, then packed up and left right before dusk. Before leaving, one of them looped the broken chain back around the post, like they were doing me a favor. The next day, I received a formal letter in the mail, certified and stamped with the logo of Elk Run Waterside Association. I'd never heard of it. The header read like a lawsuit, though it was disguised as neighborly concern. According to them, my private gate was obstructing traditional lakefront access historically shared by the Elk Run community. It went on to say I was to dismantle all artificial barriers and restore public passage within 10 business days, or face escalation to the county planning department. I stared at the letter for a good 5 minutes, making sure I wasn't missing a page explaining this was some kind of joke. My property wasn't part of any HOA. That was the whole damn point of buying this place. Before I signed anything, I'd hired a land attorney and triple-checked the title. The parcel had been legally excluded from community oversight since 2005, when the previous owner, some old hermit named Emery Cross, refused to sign the association agreement during the expansion of Elk Run. The county even filed a special notation confirming the exception. My title, zoning certificate, and property map were all clean. No ties to the HOA, no dues, no obligations, no shared anything. Still, the letter was written with bureaucratic venom, and I wasn't about to let it fester. I called the number listed at the bottom. A woman answered, brisk and polished. "This is Karen Wesley, president of Elk Run Waterside Association. How may I help you?" "Hi, Karen. This is Russell James. I just received your letter. I think there's been a pretty big misunderstanding." There was a pause, then a perfectly measured sigh. "I assume you're calling about the access road." "I'm calling about your people breaking onto my property." "Well, Mr. James, that access road has been used by the community for over 20 years. That road is on my deed. It's not a community anything. My property's excluded from the HOA. You can check the county records." "We have. And after reviewing the current community map, it's clear that your driveway overlaps with the original fire access corridor leading to the lake. That makes it a shared asset." I laughed into the phone. That corridor doesn't exist anymore. The county decommissioned it in 2004 and sold the full path with the land. The HOA wasn't even established when the easement was nullified. Karen didn't miss a beat. We'll be submitting a complaint to the district office. In the meantime, we strongly urge you to remove the gate. We'd like to resolve this peacefully." I hung up before saying something that'd end up in a transcript. Instead, I sent my attorney a copy of the letter and called the sheriff's department to file a formal report about the trespass and vandalized lock. I wasn't taking chances. Then I drove to the hardware store and bought a new chain, this time reinforced steel with an industrial padlock. I also replaced the 2 trail cams with upgraded cellular models that sent footage straight to my phone. By the time the sun set, I'd locked the gate tighter than a missile silo and rigged motion sensors along the lower driveway. As I stood by the fence, staring down that long road as the chill set in and the first snowflakes of the evening began to fall, I had a feeling this was only the beginning. And I was right. The next few days passed in a slow, simmering haze. I went about my work repairing cabins and docks in town, but I kept one eye on my phone the whole time, watching for alerts from the trail cams. Nothing happened. No motion, no break-ins, just the cold wind off the lake and the usual drifting snow. It almost lulled me into thinking that maybe the message had gotten through. Maybe the HOA realized they were barking up the wrong tree. Then came Friday. I was sipping coffee on my porch, flipping through the local paper, when I heard the faint crunch of tires on gravel. My gate camera buzzed a second later. I tapped my phone screen. On the feed, a white Suburban idling at the entrance. The passenger door opened, and out stepped a woman in a red peacoat, holding a clipboard and flanked by 2 men in matching windbreakers. One of them wore an Elk Run badge. The other was holding bolt cutters. I didn't even wait. I grabbed my coat, stepped into my boots, and walked down the hill toward the gate, boots crunching over frost-hardened earth. By the time I reached the bottom, they were already fiddling with the lock. "Back away from that gate," I called out. The words hit like a rifle crack. The woman turned. "Mr. James?" "That's me. You're on private property. I suggest you leave." She flashed a diplomatic smile. "I'm Emily Pritchard, Access Coordinator for Elk Run Waterside Association. We're here to perform a preliminary inspection per community directive. You're here to break into my property again." I cut her off. "And I've already reported your group to the sheriff's office. What you're doing is trespassing." The man with the badge, older guy with a puffed chest and sun-creased eyes, stepped forward. "This road is historically recognized as a community access path. You're obstructing ingress." "I'm obstructing unauthorized access to my land, my deed, my title, my fence. You want to see the documents?" "I'll bring them out." Emily held up the clipboard. "We have alternate documentation that suggests this path was never formally removed from the fire access registry." "Your documentation's trash," I snapped. "I've got notarized county records, zoning maps, and the exclusion clause from '05. You want to debate it? Fine. Get a court order." "We're already preparing legal action," she said smoothly. The board voted unanimously. "This isn't personal." "Good," I said, stepping up to the fence. "Then you won't mind if I install more cameras and put up signage warning against forced entry." Her expression twitched slightly. The bolt cutter guy glanced between us, uncomfortable now. They left after I threatened to call the sheriff again, but not before Emily handed me an envelope. Inside was another letter, this time with stronger language, something about non-compliance with cooperative infrastructure expectations, a load of HOA legalese that sounded more like a protection racket than civic administration. At the bottom, in tight serif print, it read, "Failure to comply will result in further action, up to and including coordinated removal of obstructive elements." Subtle. That night, I reinforced the gate, welded additional brackets, replaced the padlock with an armored unit, and moved one of the cameras to face directly down the trail in case someone tried to come through on foot. Then I drafted an official cease and desist letter, CCing my lawyer and the county sheriff. No more polite requests. If they so much as breathed on my fence again, I wanted a paper trail ready to slam on the desk. The next morning, I found flyers taped to every mailbox at the end of the gravel road, including the one I shared with the boat ramp. In bold red font, "Lake access denied. One man's gate hurts us all." The flyer accused me of isolating the community, blocking emergency access, and putting children at risk. There were even 2 photos of my gate, taken from a drone's eye view as if to make it look more ominous. The worst part, someone included my full name and parcel number on the back. I drove into town and asked around. The HOA had started a neighborhood petition for open lake access, claiming over 50 signatures already. A few of the shopkeepers had seen it, but most rolled their eyes. "Bunch of HOA nonsense," one of them muttered. "You're on your own land. Screw 'em." Still, it unsettled me. They were building momentum and public opinion, and I knew exactly where this kind of pressure campaign could go. The next night, at 2 a.m., my trail cam buzzed. I sat bolt upright in bed and checked the feed. Motion detected. A figure, dark hoodie, bolt cutters in hand, creeping toward the gate. I watched in real time as he cut through the lock. Before he could open it, floodlights snapped on. My motion sensor rig. The figure bolted. I only caught a glimpse of his back, but the cam got a clean look at his license plate as he sped off in a black pickup. The police arrived 20 minutes later. I handed them the footage and filed a report for attempted unlawful entry and property damage. They were cooperative, but clearly overworked. Told me they'd add it to the case file. I wasn't waiting around for someone else to do something. The next day, I went down to the county clerk's office, sat face to face with the zoning officer, and pulled out every document I had. My deed, my title, the 2005 exclusion letter, the original parcel map with the fire road decommissioned. I requested a notarized certified copy of the entire file. If they wanted a fight, I'd give them one, but not the kind they were expecting. By Monday morning, things had taken a turn for the surreal. I was back at the cabin sorting through my now neatly organized binder of legal documents when I got an unexpected knock at the door. Not the gate, my front door, which meant someone had gotten onto my property. I opened it fast, hand instinctively near my hip, only to see a man in a rumpled tan suit holding a manila envelope and trying very hard to look official. He had a clipboard under one arm and a badge hanging from his lanyard that read, Zoning Dispute Resolution Liaison, Gallatin County. "Mr. James?" "That's me." He cleared his throat, stepping back slightly as I squared my stance in the doorway. "I've been sent by the county zoning office. There's been a request for formal assessment of a possible obstruction of historical access." I stared at him. "Who filed it?" "I can't disclose that, sir, but I'm here to deliver the preliminary review paperwork and schedule an inspection." I took the envelope, tore it open. Inside were copies of a community-submitted property map showing my road highlighted in yellow, labeled Community Fire Access Trail, estimated 1992 to present. Beneath that, a statement claiming the gate I installed was not previously permitted and potentially in violation of a dormant clause in the Elk Run Master Plan. This was complete fantasy. The trail on the map was my driveway. The label was freshly printed. Worse, there was an updated overlay attached from the county's GIS records showing my parcel's eastern edge as shaded gray, marked as Shared Use Access Zone. "That's wrong," I said flatly, turning the paper around and pointing. "That area was fully deeded to the previous owner in 2004. There's a rescission order on the easement, and my lawyer has the stamped exclusion record from the county." The man just gave me the classic bureaucrat's shrug. "If that's the case, I'd advise you to gather your original documentation. You'll want to present them at the hearing." "Hearing?" "Yes, sir," he said, glancing at the clipboard. "There's a preliminary injunction scheduled this Thursday, 10 a.m., County Civil Court. File number's right there." When he left, I stood in my doorway, gripping the papers so hard they crumpled. A hearing. They weren't just sending flyers and volunteers anymore. They were using doctored public records to try and force legal action. I called my attorney, Janet Hughes. She was already a step ahead. Her office had received an e-filed petition for emergency injunction from Elk Run Waterside Association, claiming I was blocking critical access infrastructure. She'd already filed for discovery and a motion to delay until we could present physical records. By Wednesday, we had what we needed. Janet got her hands on the original property records from 2005, the HOA charter, my parcel's exclusion documents, the fire department's decommission memo, and the original handwritten zoning map annotated by the then county engineer, all legally binding. But then she dropped a bombshell. Someone inside the county office had updated the digital GIS layer 3 weeks ago, replacing the exclusion note with a marker that read, "Under review," and the request to modify the record. It was logged under a temporary staff account, signed by someone named A. Miller. She leaned back in her chair. "Russ, if this is who I think it is, we're looking at coordinated fraud. From inside the department? Looks like. This Miller guy, he's listed as an associate zoning technician. a glorified intern with just enough access to make trouble. That night, while prepping the full binder for court, I noticed something else. A footer on the doctored map labeled Property Insight Group LLC. A quick search turned up a Montana-registered private surveying firm with only one listed officer, Gregory Wesley. Karen Wesley's husband. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then muttered, "Of course." Thursday arrived fast. I showed up to the courthouse in jeans, flannel, and boots that still had a smear of dried pine sap on them because I wasn't pretending to be anyone but the guy who owned that land. Janet looked sharp, calm, and ready for war. Across the aisle sat Karen, her signature platinum bob stiff as steel, dressed like she was chairing a board meeting at a bank. Next to her, two lawyers in pinstripe suits, and that smug HOA smirk that says, "We live in fine print." The hearing was short and tense. Karen's lawyer argued that public records now reflected shared access, that the gate was erected in violation of zoning principles, and that community had long used the road by implied easement. Janet rose like she'd been waiting years to rip someone apart in a courtroom. She presented our maps, exclusion records, the 2005 decommission order, and, most importantly, highlighted the sudden GIS record change and the connection to Property Insight Group. The judge listened without comment, but his eyebrows went up when Janet read aloud the name Gregory Wesley. By the end, the judge declared he'd need time to review the evidence, but saw credible merit to the defense's claims and ordered a temporary freeze on any forced access or HOA activity related to my land. In legalese, that was code for "this smells like crap, and I'm not rushing into it." As I walked out of the courtroom, I glanced back at Karen. Her eyes were locked on me, and for the first time, there was no smugness, just calculation. I knew what that look meant. She wasn't finished. 2 days after the court hearing, I figured maybe things would cool down for a bit. That was my mistake. I had to drive into Bozeman for a weekend job, resurfacing a dock for a lakefront lodge, 3 hours each way. I double-checked the security system before leaving Friday morning. Motion sensors, remote camera feed, gate status. Everything was quiet. No alerts all the way through Saturday. But Sunday morning, I got a message from Curtis, one of the local marina watchmen I'd gotten friendly with since moving here. "Hey Russ, you expecting work done on your gate today? Some guys with equipment just showed up. Not sure they're yours." Attached was a photo. And I swear to God, if there's one thing I'll never forget, it's the sight of a damn yellow mini excavator parked next to my steel gate, flanked by a few dudes in reflective vests and one familiar face standing off to the side in a wool coat and sunglasses. Karen. She was standing there like she was inspecting a landscaping project. The crew had already pulled down a corner post, and from the look of the disturbed gravel, they'd tried prying up part of the concrete foundation. I didn't respond to Curtis. I floored the truck. 3 hours later, I turned onto my road and was greeted by the soft growl of diesel engines. The excavator was still there, one fence panel fully removed, another halfway ripped off. A guy in a hard hat was giving instructions to two others who were working on a section of chain link they'd torn off the side post. Karen stood near the tree line, clipboard in hand, as if this was all going according to schedule. I parked behind the tree line, cut the engine, and called the sheriff. Then I called Colby and Jared, two guys I served with in the Coast Guard who now lived nearby. 10 minutes later, they rolled in with a truckload of concrete blocks, welding gear, and the kind of military-grade flashlight that doubles as a weapon. We didn't say much. Just got to work. By the time the sheriff's deputy pulled up an hour later, we had rebuilt the destroyed panel, reinforced the base with fresh concrete, and added 2 reinforced barricades to either side of the driveway. Colby installed a pair of portable floodlights, and Jared set up a perimeter alarm, low voltage but loud enough to wake up a town. Meanwhile, I gave the deputy a tour. Karen tried to intercept him, waving a file of papers and launching into her usual speech about community access rights. But this time, the deputy held up a hand. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to remain silent while I talk to Mr. James." That part was satisfying. We reviewed the damage. I showed him the video feed from the camera mounted in the trees. Thank God the bastards hadn't spotted that one. He nodded, took photos, and logged everything. Then he asked me the one question I was hoping for. "You want to press charges?" I didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Karen must have overheard because she started shouting about unreasonable aggression, non-cooperation, and something about discriminatory enforcement. The deputy calmly asked her to leave the premises or be detained. She left, but not before promising that this will be reviewed by the county board. Good. Let them review it. By the time dusk fell, the new barricades were fully set, and I added 3 new signs. Each one was professionally printed, bolted in with stainless steel, and said, "Private property, not subject to HOA. Violators will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law." I sat on my porch that evening with Colby and Jared, passing around a bottle of rye and watching the floodlights flick on across the road. The stillness felt earned, but none of us were naive. They weren't done yet. And sure enough, that night, I received an alert from the public records portal. I'd set up tracking filings with the county zoning department. A new document had been uploaded. Revised HOA Regional Access Proposal, Elk Run Waterside Phase 2. I opened the PDF. Page 1 was familiar, the same fake map. But now it had something new, an annexed overlay showing a proposed public pier and parking lot built directly on my lakefront. The legend labeled it as communal shoreline development to be funded by a local improvement grant and constructed over the very section of land that included my dock, my fire pit, and the southern edge of my property. They weren't just trying to open a gate. They were planning to pave over my land. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I just sat at my desk under the porch lamp, reading that Phase 2 document over and over again, each time noticing a new line that sent a spike of rage down my spine. They'd submitted it not as a hypothetical, but as a pre-approved improvement concept, using a forged annexation signature from a name I recognized, Douglas Kinney, the former landowner who'd sold the property to me 5 years ago. The problem? Doug Kinney had died in 2021, and that signature was dated 6 months ago. They'd forged a dead man's approval to pave my land. At 6 a.m., I drove straight to Janet Hughes's office. She was already there, steaming coffee in hand, eyes locked on her tablet. I saw the filing. And Russ. This just turned criminal. We submitted a formal fraud report to the county clerk's office that morning. Janet requested an emergency hearing, while I contacted Doug Kinney's widow, Claire. She didn't hesitate, drove down with Doug's will, notarized proof of the sale, and a letter confirming that no such annexation had ever been signed. Claire also happened to be friends with the managing editor of the local newspaper. By that evening, the Bozeman Sentinel had posted a story titled, "Homeowner Accuses HOA of Forging Documents to Seize Private Lakefront." The photo was me standing next to my steel gate, arms crossed, with the torn-down panel in the background. The caption underneath, "Russ James says, I built this road, I paid for this land, and I will fight for it." The article went viral in town. The comment section lit up with people sharing their own horror stories about Elk Run Waterside Association. Several former residents chimed in anonymously about suspicious permit changes, sudden assessment increases, and one man claimed his cabin mysteriously failed fire inspection a week after refusing to pay an HOA fine. 2 local radio stations called me for interviews. One even drove out to the property to film. I gave them a walkthrough, the damage to the gate, the fake maps, the forged document. I made it clear I wasn't some recluse off in the woods. I was a landowner defending what was mine from a fraudulent land grab. Karen did not like that. The next morning, someone drove by and nailed a sign to one of my trees. It was hand-painted, red on white. "Keep out, host scab, you don't belong here." I ripped it down, tossed it into the fire pit, and went straight to the sheriff's office. They logged it as criminal intimidation and agreed to send a deputy by twice a day. That same night, one of my trail cameras caught a man walking the property line in a dark hoodie. He wasn't carrying tools, just a flashlight and something that looked like a clipboard. He left after 15 minutes, but the message was clear. They were watching. Janet filed an injunction for a restraining order against Elk Run's board, citing intimidation, harassment, trespass, and attempted seizure via forged instruments. The clerk scheduled an emergency hearing the following week. But Karen still wasn't done. Friday morning, I got a certified letter delivered by a courier. It was from Eagle Ridge Development Partners, LLC, informing me that they'd entered a non-binding agreement with Elk Run Waterside Association for joint development of shoreline parcels, contingent on resolution of current property boundary disputes. In other words, Karen had promised my lakefront to a commercial developer, even before she'd won anything in court. They wanted to build a parking lot, a dock, and a wedding event pavilion, and they had the blueprints to prove it. That's when I knew she'd gone all in, and so would I. I called every contact I had left from my years in federal contracting. Former inspectors, land surveyors, a zoning board retiree named Hal, who owed me a favor from a wildfire mitigation job in 2016. I compiled a dossier, not just about Karen, but about every transaction Elk Run had filed in the last 3 years. And by Saturday night, I had what I needed: multiple falsified signatories, permits filed with expired licenses, conflict of interest ties between Karen and 2 now-defunct shell LLCs that had bought and flipped 3 lakeside parcels to other HOA board members. She wasn't just trying to take my land, she'd been running a quiet land scheme for years. The Monday morning hearing was packed, not just with lawyers and HOA board members, but with reporters, residents, and even a few folks I didn't recognize, likely from the county office. Word had gotten around. Janet and I walked in with a full binder of evidence. But I didn't even get halfway to the table before I saw her, Karen, standing with 3 attorneys, all in matching gray suits, whispering furiously. She spotted me and offered a smug smile like she knew something I didn't. The judge, Honorable Rosalind Decker, was a sharp woman in her 60s who'd seen just about every land dispute in Gallatin County. She didn't waste time. Today's matter concerns an emergency injunction request against Elk Run Waterside Association. Plaintiff alleges repeated acts of trespass, intimidation, and attempted seizure of private land by fraudulent means. Defendant has filed a motion to dismiss. Let's begin. Janet stood and delivered. She didn't raise her voice, didn't grandstand, just laid out the facts like blades on a table. She presented a forensic handwriting analysis of Doug Kinney's forged signature, proof of Kinney's death years prior, photos of the physical trespass and gate damage, security footage of the demolition crew, the HOA's forged boundary map. Overlaid with official GIS data, a notarized letter from Claire Kinney, financial links between Karen and 2 of the shell companies. Then she handed the judge a thumb drive. Your Honor, this contains time-stamped emails between Ms. Hale and the development firm, which referenced my client's land as an acquisition target. This was before any legal basis for claim existed. Judge Decker stared at the screen for a long time, then slowly turned her head to Karen's table. Ms. Hale, are you prepared to respond? Karen's lead attorney stood. Your Honor, Elk Run maintains that there was a clerical error. The judge cut him off. I'm not interested in excuses for forgery, Mr. Berman. Not unless you're prepared to discuss them in the context of criminal liability. That shut them up. The judge granted the injunction on the spot, full restraining order against Elk Run HOA, their board members, and any contractors working on their behalf. They were barred from setting foot on my property, contacting me, or engaging in any activity involving my land pending a formal hearing. But the damage to their reputation was already done. Local outlets began circling like sharks. That evening, the Bozeman Sentinel ran a front-page piece titled Forgery, Fraud, and HOA Overreach. County Judge Blocks Land. Grab Attempt. The article exposed everything. Karen's connections to shady LLCS. The forged documents, even quotes from Claire Kinney about the disgraceful manipulation of my late husband's name. And then it got worse. For her. By Thursday, the Montana Attorney General's office had opened a case. A representative contacted Janet to request our full evidence package. Meanwhile, I had 2 zoning officials show up at my door, this time on my side. They asked to review the shoreline, inspect the supposed communal dock location, and verify the original survey lines. I walked them right to the fire pit and pointed at the latest boundary marker I'd installed in concrete. They didn't say much, just nodded and took photos. Friday afternoon, I received an email marked confidential. Attached was a PDF from a county source I won't name. It was an internal memo from Elk Run's last board meeting before the media storm, where Karen had laid out her plan to increase HOA asset holdings by incorporating adjacent unregistered lots through structural development initiatives. It included a map with my land labeled Phase 2 High Priority. They never thought I'd fight back. They thought they'd wear me down, bulldoze with paperwork, hide behind bureaucracy. But now, every document they ever filed was being examined under a forensic microscope. Karen made her last move the next day. A thin gold-accented envelope was slipped under my gate. Inside, a letter from her attorneys stating their intention to resolve this conflict amicably by proposing a 50-year access easement through your property in exchange for non-interference. They wanted me to let them build a permanent road right through my lakefront. No money, no ownership change, just my eternal permission for them to invade my land in peace. I stood over my fire pit and watched it burn. Saturday night was unusually still, not a breeze off the lake, not a single coyote call, just silence, thick and uneasy. I'd learned to listen to those kinds of silences. They usually meant trouble. At 2:37 a.m., my motion alert went off. The trail cam near the rear easement flared. I tapped into the live feed on my phone and froze. 3 silhouettes, all in dark clothing, moving with flashlights pointed down. They weren't just passing through, they had tools. One carried bolt cutters, another something bulkier, maybe a post puller. I called the sheriff's office immediately. No hesitation. By the time they arrived 18 minutes later, the intruders were gone, but not fast enough. The cameras caught everything. License plate, faces. One guy even glanced up straight into the lens. Clear as day. Turns out 2 of them were contractors who'd been hired during the first attempted demolition. The third, a junior board member of the Elk Run HOA. And now they were on my land in the middle of the night, with tools, under a restraining order. The deputy didn't even blink. That's a felony trespass and criminal contempt. We'll take it from here. By noon, all 3 were in custody, but I knew Karen wasn't done. Later that day, a woman from a supposed local documentary initiative knocked on my gate, clipboard in hand, polite smile. Asked if I was willing to do a brief filmed interview about community land access. I asked her who sent her. She didn't answer. I told her to walk back to her car while I gave her the chance. Turns out she wasn't with any media group. She was an unpaid intern at a private PR firm in Helena, one that had worked with real estate developers across the Northwest, and just 3 weeks prior had signed a short-term contract with Eagle Ridge Development Partners. Karen was trying to spin the narrative, build some false image of me as the aggressive loner keeping families from their shared natural heritage. She'd lost in court, lost in press. Now she was hoping to win by optics. But what she didn't count on was how thoroughly I'd documented everything. By Sunday, my compiled report, complete with annotated footage, email records, financial disclosures, and notarized witness statements, was delivered directly to the Montana Department of Justice. Monday morning, the county sheriff himself knocked on Karen's door. Not a deputy, the sheriff. She was placed under arrest for filing forged legal documents, violating a court injunction, criminal conspiracy to seize private land, coordinated trespass, obstruction of zoning investigations. The charges were stacked. And more were coming. She screamed all the way into the cruiser. Reporters were already waiting on the street. Apparently someone had tipped off the Sentinel. The video hit the local news within the hour. Headlines lit up again. HOA president arrested in multi-count land fraud case. Sheriff confirms ongoing investigation into HOA financial scheme. Homeowners' cameras seal indictment in attempted property theft. The footage of Karen being led away, flailing, red-faced, shouting about her right to access the water, became the most watched local clip that week. By sunset, every other member of the HOA board had resigned. That evening, I walked down to the lake with a beer in one hand and my old dog Max at my side. We sat on the dock I built with my own hands, watching the clouds shift over the water, while I replayed the arrest video one last time on mute. Did it feel like justice? Not yet, but it was damn close. 2 weeks later, I sat in the Missoula County Courthouse while Karen's arraignment played out like a slow-moving train wreck. The state prosecutor laid it all out in clean, sharp language. Wire fraud, forgery, conspiracy, abuse of public office, coercion, tampering with county zoning records, all corroborated by the evidence I'd submitted, plus the cooperation of the intern from the PR firm who, after being questioned, handed over her email thread with Karen, including one gem that read, "We just need a sympathetic angle. I want the public to see him as a paranoid gatekeeper, hoarding community nature. We'll deal with the legal later." Yeah, she actually wrote that. Karen didn't speak during the hearing, not directly. But when the judge denied bail and ordered her held pending trial, I saw her head snap toward me, her face twisted into something between hatred and panic. She never expected to lose, but her house of cards was gone and the debris was falling fast. Over the next month, the fallout snowballed. HOA members who'd backed her either fled the board or came crawling out with plea bargains, and we were just following her lead statements. One of them, an older man named Francis, turned state's witness and admitted the board had planned to sell off a portion of the reclaimed lakeside for private boat slips, all based on land they never owned. The county opened a formal audit of the HOA's finances. Turns out over $200,000 were unaccounted for. That included phantom improvement grants, funnel payments to shell contractors, and a developer deposit tied to Eagle Ridge's now abandoned plans. My lawyer sent them a polite letter of invitation to settle damages. They offered $35,000. We responded with a formal demand for $150,000 in damages, legal fees, and defamation claims, or we'd see them in federal court. They folded fast. In the end, I received a full cash settlement, a signed public apology from the HOA's remaining members, and court-affirmed documentation securing my absolute property rights, unrestricted access protections, and permanent exemption from HOA claims. I also received something else: peace. With the mess behind me, I focused on the work I loved, fixed up the dock, installed a new boat lift, replaced the entire gate with a reinforced steel system featuring thermal cameras and smart detection, connected directly to the sheriff's department feed. I mounted a polished bronze sign above the new entrance: private property, no HOA access. Trespass, sire felony. A couple of locals joked I should sell smaller versions on Etsy. One morning, I walked out with my coffee and watched a bald eagle sweep low over the water. Max trotted beside me like nothing had ever happened. Maybe he was right. Karen ended up accepting a plea deal for 10 years with no parole. She'll serve it at the Women's State Facility near Billings. Her mugshot still circulates on homeowner rights blogs as a cautionary tale. As for the Elk Run Waterside Association, it collapsed, formally dissolved. Half its former lots are now under new ownership, most of them bought by independent families who now know exactly where the boundaries are. No one ever tried to touch my gates again, and if they ever do, I'll be ready.